The wind howled like a chorus of desperate souls, tearing through the mountainside with a ferocity that seemed almost alive. It clawed at Lila Montgomery's tattered cloak, whipping it around her trembling form, yanking at the edges until she thought it might shred entirely from her shoulders. Each step she forced forward in the knee-deep snow felt like pushing through molasses, the ice biting into her exposed skin, her hair frozen in spiky tendrils across her face. Her breath came in ragged gasps, plumes of white vapor spiraling upward before the storm swallowed them whole, and yet she kept moving because stopping meant everything she had fought for would vanish. Pain stabbed her ankle. Sharp, cruel, relentless. She had twisted it on a hidden root, hidden beneath a slick layer of ice and snow, and the ache radiated up her leg, setting her teeth on edge with every step. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, echoing in time with the relentless howl of the wind, each beat a frantic reminder of the danger pursuing her. She barely allowed herself to glance back, fearful that movement, shadow, or the glint of eyes in the storm would find her, mark her, and drag her back to the life she had spent years trying to escape. The forced marriage. The cage she had fled from. The life she had been shoved into, not chosen, one of cold protocol, cruel expectation and empty eyes that judged her every breath. Lord Victor Hale, the man she had been promised to, the one whose control had spread over her like a shadow that would not release. He could not touch her now. Not here. Not in this blizzard, in the silence between snow and scream, where the world seemed almost suspended between heartbeats. Every memory of his cold, calculating grip on her life clawed at her insides, a raw mix of shame and rage, and yet she could not let it consume her. She had to keep going. She had to survive. Snow stung her face, melting in thin rivulets that froze again before they could drip, and her eyelashes were stiff with ice. The mountains rose around her like silent, towering judges, jagged and unforgiving. She had never felt so small, so insignificant, and yet, there was something underneath it all. Something deeper, raw, pulsing inside her that refused to be buried. Her chest tightened and she felt it, a flicker of fire, silver light sparking under her skin. The power had been there all her life, buried under fear, shame, and the weight of other people's expectations. And now, with the world pressing in on her, with frost and shadow and terror closing the circle around her, it surged. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to make her gasp, enough to make her pulse feel like it could burst from her ribs. Her legs threatened to buckle under the strain, her fingers numb as they clawed for purchase on the icy rocks that lined the mountainside trail. Every nerve screamed for her to collapse, to give in, and yet adrenaline pushed her forward, a brutal, beautiful thing that let her ignore the pain for one more step, one more desperate lunge toward freedom. She could barely think, barely breathe, but her mind clung to one truth: she could not be caught. She would not be returned. She would not belong to anyone but herself. Then she heard it, the softest shift, the faintest crunch of snow behind her. Her chest seized in terror. Not the storm, not the howl of wind or the rattle of trees. Something else. Something alive. Something that moved with purpose, precision, like it knew exactly where she was. Her pulse surged, her wolf stirring within her, a whisper at the edges of her consciousness. It told her to run faster, to hide, to survive, to trust nothing but her instincts. Her eyes darted through the white blur, trying to pierce the wall of snow that masked the world, but she saw nothing. And yet she felt it. The stalker. The predator. The unknown. Her breaths came faster now, short, shallow gasps that stung in her lungs, but she had no choice. The snowstorm offered her no cover, the cliffs offered no refuge, and yet she pushed forward, boots slipping on ice, every step more desperate than the last. A faint metallic tang filled her mouth, the taste of fear. Or was it the sharp edge of her awakening power? She couldn't tell, couldn't pause to think. The only thing she could do was move. Survive. Life. A flash of movement in her peripheral vision made her stumble, nearly falling over the edge of the trail. Heart hammering, she caught herself just in time, and for a moment the storm seemed to pause. The silence was worse than the howling wind. She could hear her own heartbeat, thundering, echoing, a frantic drumbeat that marked the rhythm of her terror. And then she felt it. The presence, close now, impossibly close, though she had seen nothing. The hairs on her neck stood on end. Her wolf roared in her mind, a low, warning growl, and she realized with a sharp, cold spike of understanding. This was no ordinary human. Panic and curiosity warred in her chest, twisting her gut into knots. Whoever, or whatever, was following her knew who she was, knew what she was. And yet, instead of running at her, it lingered at the edge of the storm, watching. Waiting. Calculating. Her ankles screamed in protest, a sharp, stabbing agony that brought tears to her eyes, but she did not stop. She could not. Every instinct she had screamed to run, to flee, to vanish into the white oblivion, but something primal, fierce, unrelenting surged in her chest. Her power. That forbidden, dangerous, beautiful power she had been told to hide. The fire in her veins pulsed stronger, urging her to ignore the pain, to push forward. And in the darkest, coldest corner of her mind, a thought flickered. If she could survive this, if she could reach beyond the edge of the world and hold on to life, maybe, just maybe, she could finally be free. Snow whipped across her face again, stinging, burning, freezing the tears on her cheeks into sharp little shards. Her breath came ragged, fogging before her like ghostly clouds, and every step was a battle, every movement a triumph against the storm, against fear, against the life that had tried to cage her. She did not look back, but she could feel it, the predator following her. And in that terrible, intoxicating knowledge, a thrill ran through her veins. Furious. Panic, absolutely. But also, anticipation. Something deep and dangerous, something she had been waiting for without even knowing. The trail narrowed, rocks jagged and slick beneath her boots. Each movement sent pain shooting up her leg, but she ignored it, letting adrenaline and the wolf inside guide her. The storm roared in her ears, a deafening symphony of ice and wind and desperate survival, and she realized she had no choice. She could not hide. She could not fall. She could only go forward. Into the unknown. Into the white abyss. Into the impossible. A shadow shifted again, closer now, almost beside her, and she sensed it. The weight of eyes on her back, intelligent, calculating, impossible to ignore. Her chest tightened, breath caught, and yet her heart thudded with a strange, undeniable excitement. She did not know what awaited her in the storm, but she did know one thing. She would meet it on her own terms or not at all. The silver flame beneath her skin flared stronger, a whisper, a pulse, a heartbeat all at once. It called to her, urged her, teased her. She could feel her power, raw and wild, stirring with a hungry, dangerous promise. And yet she had no control. Not yet. But she knew that whatever, or whoever, was stalking her, they would see it. They would see her. Every nerve in her body screamed, every muscle tensed, every step a test of will and endurance. Her vision blurred from cold and exhaustion, but she pressed on, guided by the raw, untamed instincts that had always been her secret, her curse and her salvation. And then, just as the storm reached its peak, the wind screaming like the world itself was tearing apart, she heard it. Not the wind, not the snow, not the jagged crack of ice beneath her boots, but something else. A low, deliberate sound like a growl that rumbled through the mountains, vibrating in her chest, in her bones, in the very air around her. She froze. Heart pounding, breath ragged, every fiber of her being screaming to run. She turned slightly, just a flicker, and saw a figure emerging from the storm. Towering. Dark. Powerful. And something in the depths of her blood, in the hidden, dangerous part of her that had been sleeping for far too long, stirred awake with a shiver of recognition she could not explain. The chase had ended. But survival was only just beginning. If you love forbidden love, dangerous heroes, and stories that burn with passion and power, subscribe to Anne's romance collections now. You won't want to miss a single moment of what's coming next. The figure that emerged from the storm seemed almost impossibly large at first, shadowed and dark against the white blur of snow, a moving silhouette that carried the quiet authority of mountains themselves. Derek Blackwood. His presence alone shifted the very air around her, dense with unspoken power, danger, and a weight she couldn't name yet. Every step he took toward her was deliberate, measured, as if the storm itself was bending around him, afraid to interfere. Lila's heart, already hammering in her chest, skipped violently when his voice broke through the howl of wind. Lila Montgomery, you shouldn't be out here alone. She froze, the snow around her boots melting into a slush of fear and disbelief. Her name on his lips, it carried authority, yes, but also a strange tenderness she could not place. The way he said it made her pulse pound in a way that was terrifying and electrifying all at once. Her wolf stirred instinctively, ears pinned against the harshness of the wind, alert, tasting danger in the air, yet something deep inside told her to pause. Something primal whispered that he was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. Lila's breath hitched. The pain in her ankle screamed, a stabbing reminder of how vulnerable she truly was, yet she did not move. She couldn't. Not yet. She could feel his eyes on her, piercing, intense, examining every trembling line of her body as though he could see beneath the snow, beneath the fear, straight into the fragile core of her soul. Her chest tightened with the weight of his gaze. There was danger here. Of that she was certain. But there was something else, something she could not articulate. a pull magnetic and terrifying, drawing her toward him even as every instinct screamed to flee. Then the snow erupted. From the shadows, from the twisted underbrush barely visible in the storm, rogue wolves surged, eyes glowing with hunger, teeth bared, snarls ripping through the howl of wind. They lunged at her with a speed that left her breathless, teeth snapping dangerously close, claws slicing the frozen air where she had been just a heartbeat before. And then he moved. Derek Blackwood was everywhere at once. One moment he was just a shadow at the edge of her vision, the next he was a wall of strength between her and the pack, his movements fluid, predatory, devastatingly precise. Wolves collided with him, and yet he did not stumble. He did not hesitate. He struck with power that was terrifying and awe-inspiring, ripping through the air with a speed that made her eyes widen in disbelief. Every strike, every movement spoke of mastery, of centuries of training, of a body honed to perfection, and a mind that was both ruthless and calculating. Lila stumbled back, the snow beneath her boots giving way, and she fell to her knees, breath ragged, muscles trembling, her ankle nearly giving out. Her pulse hammered so violently that it drowned out even the howling storm. Derek's eyes found hers, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. The storm, the wolves, the world beyond. Everything vanished, leaving only the two of them. He extended a hand. Not just a hand but a promise. A question. An impossible invitation. Hesitation flickered across her mind for a split second, because she didn't know him. She didn't trust him. And yet, the wolves were closing in. The snow was blinding. Her ankles screamed in agony. And she realized, in a moment sharp as ice, that she had no choice. Her hand shot out, fingers brushing against his palm, and electricity shot through her body in a way that made her gasp. There was contact, brief, fleeting, but it ignited something that made her lungs constrict with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He pulled her to her feet with a strength that was gentle, commanding, and terrifying all at once. "You're fast," he said, voice low, steady, carrying a weight that made her shiver, "but you're not fast enough for them." Before she could respond, before she could gather herself, the rogue wolves lunged again. Derek moved like liquid shadow, a predator dancing between life and death. Lila could barely keep up, stumbling over frozen rocks, lungs burning, muscles screaming, yet something inside her, the part of her that had always been hidden, untamed, dangerous, thrummed in response. She could feel her power now, not fully awake but pulsing, bright, silver-hot beneath her skin. A shiver ran through her body, and she instinctively leapt back when a wolf lunged near enough to graze her. And then, instinct, fear, and something undefinable drove her hands to his chest, her lips pressing against him. A kiss born of desperation, of survival, of a need she could barely name. The wind tore around them, snow lashing their faces, yet for that moment time fractured. The world slowed. Derek froze, shock flashing across his face in the briefest instant before instinct, control, and the wolf inside him took over. The rogue wolves circled, snapping and snarling, but Derek's hands were on her, steady, unyielding, holding her close with a power that made her knees tremble. His body pressed against hers, not aggressive, not harsh, but impossibly solid, impossibly protective. And in that moment, Lila felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Safety. And beyond that, something deeper, something that both terrified and thrilled her. Desire. Connection. And an electric, undeniable spark that seared through her very core. Derek's lips parted slightly as if to speak, but the storm drowned his words. Instead, his eyes, piercing, calculating yet strangely warm, locked onto hers. She saw not just recognition, not just curiosity, but understanding. Understanding of her fear, her pain, her fury, and perhaps most dangerous of all, her power. A wolf howled in the distance, echoing across the frozen mountains, and it was as if the world itself had shifted, acknowledging the bond forged in the eye of the storm. Lila's chest tightened, her pulse a rapid drumbeat in her ears, her wolf stirring fiercely, whispering, begging, demanding attention. She could feel the silver fire within her, bright and restless, thrumming in response to the proximity of Derek, to the danger surrounding them, to the impossible energy that crackled between them. The rogue wolves attacked again, teeth snapping, claws raking the snow, but Derek moved with a lethal elegance, a predator dancing on the edge of death. He intercepted each one, his hands, fists, and body moving as one deadly unit, Every action precise, calculated and devastatingly effective. Lila's heart pounded with fear, with awe, and with something she refused to name. Her breath came in harsh, uneven gasps, but she stayed pressed against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the security of his presence, and the undeniable pull that threaded through the storm, through her fear, through her power. "You're stronger than you realize," he said, voice low, carrying a gravity that pressed against her chest, her ribs, her very soul. "And whatever you are, whatever you think you're hiding, it's not just power. It's a force that could change everything." She looked up at him, snow clinging to her lashes, hair plastered against her cheeks, chest heaving, and saw it, truth in his eyes. Not judgment. Not mockery. But recognition. And in that recognition, in the way his gaze held her, she felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Hope that maybe she could survive this. Hope that maybe she could belong somewhere. Hope that maybe she could finally be free. The wind tore through the mountains, whipping snow and ice around them in a fury, yet for a fleeting heartbeat the storm seemed to pause. The rogue wolves snarled, circling, but Derek's stance never wavered, never faltered. He was the storm and the calm within it, a paradox that made her chest ache and her wolf stir in excitement, fear, and anticipation. "You should trust no one," Derek said finally, his tone low and wary, yet undeniably intimate, almost confessional. "But right now, trust me." Lila's lips trembled against his in that moment, and though she could not yet articulate why, she felt a pull she could not resist. Desire, danger, and raw, unshakable instinct collided in her chest. She wanted to push away. She wanted to run. She wanted to survive alone. And yet, in his presence, with the storm raging and the wolves circling, with every nerve in her body alight, she realized she had no choice but to accept the truth. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. And in that fleeting, impossible moment of connection, the world shifted. The snow swirled more violently, the wind screamed like 1,000 voices, the rogue wolves leapt. And Derek moved, swift, fluid, unstoppable, an unyielding force that shielded her, protected her, and claimed a piece of her heart she did not yet know was his. Time fractured around them, stretched thin like ice underfoot, and Lila knew with a fierce certainty. Her life had just changed forever. The storm, the danger, the fear, the spark of fire inside her. All of it was only the beginning. And the man who held her steady, whose presence both terrified and thrilled her, whose power was raw, deadly, and yet astonishingly human, was only the first of many truths she would have to face. The chase was over. The storm raged on. And Derek Blackwood, he was more than she could have imagined, more than she could have feared, and far more than she could have ever anticipated. If you're already feeling the fire between them, if your heart is pounding with fear, desire, and curiosity, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. The storm has just begun, and you'll want to see every heartbeat, every secret, every spark of power unfold. The storm raged around them, a deafening chorus of wind and ice, but inside the fragile warmth of Derek's hold, Lila's mind began to wander, backward, into the shadows of a past she had tried desperately to forget. She leaned against him, her body trembling not just from cold, but from the raw pulse of adrenaline still thrumming through her veins, and in that trembling her mind opened to memories she had locked away for years, memories that now clawed at her heart with sharpened claws. She remembered the pack. Her old pack, the only family she had ever known, or thought she had known. They had raised her in the northern highlands, taught her the ways of survival, of shifting, of loyalty to the tribe that had been her home. And yet, the moment her power revealed itself, her forbidden gift of Silverfire, they had recoiled in fear. She remembered the day vividly, the air thick with smoke and disbelief, her hands ablaze with the silver flame she had not yet learned to control, the way the elders had stepped back as if she were a monster, as if her very existence was a threat to everything they held sacred. "You are too dangerous," one of them had said, eyes wide, voice shaking with dread. "Your flames, they are not meant for us. You will destroy everything." The words had cut deeper than any blade could, leaving marks on her soul that would never heal. Rejection, bitter and absolute, had fallen over her like ice. Her foster father, the man who had taught her to trust, had lowered his gaze, shame and fear mingling in his eyes. And her mother had simply turned away, muttering prayers and shaking her head, as though hope itself was too fragile to withstand her child's existence. She remembered the exile. Not a formal banishment, but a series of cold, cruel isolations, glances that avoided her, whispers that poisoned the air, orders to stay away from sacred grounds, from hunts, from rituals. Even her friends, the ones she had laughed and fought and trained with, began to drift like snowflakes caught in a harsh wind, fragile and fleeting, vanishing before she could reach them. Alone. Always alone. And then, the marriage. Forced. Bound. A cage that had been presented as opportunity, duty, honor, though in truth it had been nothing but chains. Lord Victor Hale. He had walked into her life with polished charm and an iron will, hiding the cruelty beneath a veneer of civility. The memory of him haunted her. The way his smile had promised affection and control simultaneously, the way his hands had lingered too long, the way his gaze had measured her like property, like something to be possessed rather than loved. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his grip, the suffocating weight of his expectations pressing against her chest, stealing breath and hope alike. She had tried to comply, to survive, to make peace with the cage she had been thrown into, but every day had been a battle. Every command, every expectation, every forced smile a war waged silently against the growing fire inside her. And it had burned. Oh, how it had burned. The silver flame that pulsed through her veins, forbidden and dangerous, had surged in quiet defiance every time he had tried to control her, every time he had dared to touch her life without consent. And yet, the kiss. The memory of Derek Blackwood's presence, the feel of his hands steadying her as the wolves attacked, the desperate, terrified kiss pressed against his lips, refused to leave her mind. It haunted her not in a shameful way but in a confusing, dizzying way. Her heart had betrayed her, pounding with a rhythm that she did not recognize, one that spoke of need, of protection, of something primal that could not be denied. And that was terrifying. She had learned long ago that to trust, to let someone see the fire within her, was dangerous. Betrayal had come in many forms, through family, through pack, through those who had sworn loyalty. Her wolf, the part of her that had always been the truest reflection of her soul, had warned her again and again, do not let them close. Do not let them see. You are dangerous and they will fear you. Yet Derek had seen her. Truly seen her in the blink of a moment that felt like an eternity. He had not flinched at the silver light pulsing beneath her skin. He had not stepped back in fear. He had not recoiled or condemned. And that was something she had never known. To be recognized not as a threat, not as a weapon, not as a mistake, but as herself. Her chest tightened with the memory. She could still feel the heat of his body pressed against her own, the shock of human contact in the midst of chaos, the undeniable sense that she had been seen by someone who might actually understand. And yet that understanding terrified her more than the wolves ever could. Because trust had always been dangerous. And yet desire had been just as lethal. She leaned against him, shivering not just from cold but from the emotional onslaught that surged through her. Every memory of rejection, every phantom hand of control, every whisper of doubt and shame collided violently with the warmth of the moment, with the undeniable fact that she had not been alone in the storm. Derek had been there. Derek had been steady. Derek had been human. Her mind went back further, past the storm and the kiss, past the forced marriage and the exile, to the earliest memories of her power. She had always been different. Even as a child she had felt the silver flame flickering within her, responding to fear, to anger, to instinct. She had tried to hide it, to bury it beneath polite smiles, beneath careful obedience, beneath the illusion of normalcy, but it had never stayed buried. Teachers, friends, even strangers had recoiled at the brightness of her aura, the intensity of her presence. She had been called dangerous, wild, cursed. And maybe she had been all of those things. Maybe she had been born to be feared. Yet in Derek's presence the fire pulsed differently. Not wildly, not destructively, but controlled, alive, responsive. And that terrified her. Because she had been trained, conditioned, and broken to survive alone. To need no one. To trust no one. To fear the spark within herself that had always set her apart. And now, in the chaos of the storm and the heartbeat of a man who did not recoil, she realized something startling. Maybe survival alone was no longer enough. Tears stung her eyes. Not from pain, not from cold, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all. From decades of loneliness, from chains both literal and invisible, from knowing that every step she had taken to protect herself had come at the cost of isolation and longing. And now, Now she had a choice she had never dared to imagine. He could trust. He could feel. She could allow herself to be seen. And the thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Her wolf growled softly inside her, a low, cautious rumble that spoke of both warning and curiosity. Do not trust easily, it whispered. Danger comes in many forms. You are still a target. And yet another voice, one she had not heard in a long time, spoke alongside it. But maybe not all danger is enemy. Maybe some are meant to protect you. Maybe some are meant to awaken you. Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear, longing, and the faintest glimmer of hope pressing against her ribs. Memories of the forced marriage, of the relentless rejection, of the fear that had dominated her life, they all collided with the warmth and strength of Derek's presence. Every instinct screamed to pull away, to protect herself, to hide. Every nerve, every sinew, every pulse of her being screamed that trust was perilous. And yet, she could not pull away. The kiss in the storm lingered in her mind, a spark of connection that refused to fade. The strength in his hands, the steadiness in his gaze, the acknowledgement of her fire. It was intoxicating. She had always believed herself too dangerous, too wild, too uncontainable to be loved, to be understood. And yet, in the heart of the storm, with snow lashing against her face and rogue wolves circling, she had felt something she had not felt in years. Recognition, empathy, the faintest trace of belonging. And it terrified her. Because if she allowed herself to feel it, to admit it, to embrace it, what would that mean for her survival? What would that mean for her heart? What would that mean for the fire she had spent her entire life hiding? Her pulse slowed slightly as she leaned against him, body trembling, thoughts spiraling, emotions crashing like waves against jagged cliffs. Fear, desire, hope, pain, they all collided within her, a storm more intense than the one raging outside. She had been taught to control her power, to suppress her emotions, to guard her heart, to survive alone. And yet here she was, shivering against a man she barely knew, feeling the silver flame within her stir in a way that was both terrifying and undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, Lila Montgomery allowed herself a fleeting thought. Maybe, just maybe, she did not have to survive alone. If you are feeling Lila's fire, her fear, her longing, if your heart is racing with every heartbeat, every memory, every spark of power, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. This story is just beginning, and the storm of emotions is only getting stronger. The Evernight forest lay before them, dark and solemn, each tree a sentinel from a time long before humans had ever walked the earth. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, a ghostly silver that glimmered on the frost-coated leaves, illuminating patches of the forest floor in fractured patterns that seemed almost deliberate, as if guiding their path. Derek moved ahead with a steady confidence, his presence a beacon in the shadowed wilderness, and Lila followed, her every step tentative, heart pounding, lungs burning from the climb and the lingering storm. This was not merely a forest. She could feel it, every branch, every root, every whisper of wind vibrating with history, with power, with the weight of countless generations of wolves who had walked this land long before she had been born. The hairs on her arms rose, her wolf stirring with a strange, electric anticipation. Her silver flame pulsed faintly beneath her skin, a reminder that she was not merely human in this moment, that she carried something ancient, something forbidden, something the world had both feared and coveted. Ahead, the ruins emerged through the mist like remnants of a dream half-remembered. Stone pillars, crumbling arches, and runes etched into weathered rock glowed faintly with a silver light that danced across the frost. The air hummed with an energy so thick it pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. The whispers came first, subtle, almost imperceptible at the edge of hearing, voices not entirely human, carrying tones of warning, reverence, and something that bordered on awe. They spoke in a language older than memory, older than speech itself, and yet their meaning seeped into her mind with crystalline clarity. She comes. The Moonfire Bearer awakens. Her steps faltered, boots crunching softly against frost and broken stone. The words, the voices, the runes, they all spoke of something far larger than her, something beyond her understanding. The Moonfire Bearer. The legend her mother had whispered about in hushed tones when Lila was a child, tales meant to terrify her into obedience. She had always dismissed them as stories, myths to keep the young ones in line. But now, standing amidst ruins that seemed older than time itself, She could feel their weight pressing down on her, tangible and terrifying. "You're trembling," Derek said softly, stepping closer. His voice cut through the whispers of the forest, grounding her. The flicker of silver light beneath his eyes betrayed an awareness, a recognition that made her stomach tighten. "It's not just cold. You feel it too, don't you?" She swallowed, trying to steady her breath, trying to convince herself that she was not entirely lost in awe and fear. I don't know if I should," she whispered, voice trembling. "All my life, I've been told I'm dangerous, that I shouldn't exist, that my power will destroy everything." Derek's gaze softened, a brief flicker of warmth that pierced the tension surrounding them. "Power doesn't destroy, Lila," he said, low, deliberate, unwavering. "It's the choices you make with it. That's what matters." She looked away, eyes tracing the glowing runes on the nearest pillar. Silverfire danced across her vision, reflecting in the frost, and for the first time in years, she wondered if she had been wrong about herself. If perhaps she was not a curse, not a mistake, not a weapon to be feared. Perhaps she was something more. Something greater. The whispers intensified, weaving through the branches and the mist, coiling around her mind like smoke. She could see visions now, flickering behind her eyelids. Wolves running under a blood-red moon, silver flames illuminating the night, packs uniting under banners of fire and frost, and then destruction. Cities aflame, lands torn apart, her own hands raised in both creation and devastation. The prophecy was not merely a story. It was a warning, a guide, and a burden all at once. "The Moonfire Bearer," Derek murmured, his hand brushing against her arm, grounding her without breaking her focus. "It's not just legend. It's real. And it's you." She flinched, heart hammering. "Me? That can't be right. I'm not ready. I'm not strong enough. I barely control anything within myself. I can't lead. I can't." "Don't talk like that," he said firmly but without harshness. His eyes bore into hers, fierce and steady, demanding yet not cruel. "You already have strength. You survived storms, wolves, betrayal, exile, and a life that tried to break you. You have more power than you realize, Lila. And the forest, the pack, the prophecy, they all know it. You can feel it. Don't deny it." She shook her head, swallowing hard, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Survived. But I've also been alone. Always alone. And that's the part I'm afraid of. That I'll fail and destroy everything." Derek's hand tightened briefly around hers, a grounding force against the whirlwind of doubt and fear. "Then you won't be alone," he said. "Not now. Not ever. We'll be here. And when the time comes, the pack will stand with you whether you believe it or not. The Moonfire Bearer, she isn't just a legend. She's a choice. And every choice has consequences but also possibility." The runes pulsed again, silver light flaring across the ruins. A low hum reverberated through the stone, shaking loose frost and ice. Lila's wolf stirred, alert, whispering, cautious but curious. Power, awakening, destiny, danger. Each word, a thread pulling her toward something she both longed for and feared. She stepped closer to one of the pillars, brushing her fingers over the etched symbols. They burned lightly beneath her touch, a warmth that made her gasp. Images flashed before her eyes. Wolves bowing in allegiance, fire spiraling into the sky, the silver flame dancing along her limbs as if the universe itself had been waiting for her to claim it. Her chest tightened. She wanted to turn away, to run. But the pull was undeniable. "You're ready," Derek whispered almost reverently, standing beside her. His presence was steady, anchoring her to the moment, and yet the intensity of his gaze made her heart ache. "Whether you believe it or not, you've been ready your entire life. All of this, the exile, the rejection, the forced marriage, it was shaping you, preparing you. And now, the world needs you." Lila closed her eyes, head bowed, hands trembling as the energy of the ruins and the prophecy pulsed through her. Doubt screamed within her, clawing at her resolve. "I'm not ready. I'm not strong enough. I'm dangerous." But another voice, quiet but insistent, whispered beneath it all. "You are the Moonfire Bearer. You always have been." A chill ran down her spine as the visions grew stronger. She saw herself standing atop a cliff, silver flames curling from her hands, wolves surrounding her in a circle of trust and fear. She saw herself uniting packs, bridging centuries of enmity, standing as a beacon of power and authority. And then, destruction. She saw villages reduced to ash, loyal packs torn apart, and she felt the weight of responsibility, heavier than snow-laden boughs, heavier than the storm that had chased her here. Tears blurred her vision. She turned slightly, seeing Derek watching her with unwavering intensity, a quiet fire in his eyes that mirrored the storm within her. She could feel it. His belief in her, his recognition of the fire she had tried to hide, the strength she had denied in herself. And it terrified her because she was not used to being seen, truly seen without judgment or fear. "The spirits are speaking," he said, voice low, almost mystical, carrying through the silence of the ruins. "They've been waiting. They've been waiting for you to claim it. The Moonfire Bearer isn't a title. It's a responsibility, a power, a path. And it's yours, if you choose to take it." Lila swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to flee, to hide, to deny. But the energy of the forest, the weight of the prophecy, the pulse of her own forbidden silver flame, and the steady presence of Derek Blackwood beside her, it all pressed in on her, relentless, undeniable. She took a step closer to the center of the ruins. Frost crunched beneath her boots. Snow swirled around them like silver dust. And in the silence, broken only by the whispering spirits and the faint hum of ancient magic, she felt something stir deep within her. A spark of recognition, a thread of destiny unraveling, a truth that had been waiting for centuries to awaken. And she knew with a certainty that chilled and thrilled her at once. Her life would never be the same. The Moonfire Bearer had awoken. And Lila Montgomery was that bearer. If the forest chills ran down your spine, if the prophecy sparked a fire in your heart, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. The storm of destiny has only begun, and Lila's journey is far from over. The ruins still hummed with energy, the silver runes flickering faintly beneath the weight of the prophecy, when the first sign of threat cut through the fragile calm. Lila barely registered the subtle change in the wind at first, a sharp shift that made the hairs on her arms stand on end, her wolf bristling beneath her skin, but Derek did. He froze, senses honed to the edge of instinct, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then they came tearing through the trees like shadows turned to teeth. Rogue wolves, 20, 30, 50 of them, pelted through the underbrush, eyes glowing like embers, snarls ripping across the snow-laden forest. Their movements were coordinated, predatory, and terrifyingly precise, as if guided by something darker than mere hunger. And behind them, cutting through the chaos with an authority that rivaled Derek's own, came a figure draped in shadow and malice. Rhett Blackthorn, rival alpha of the Shadowfang Pack, the one who had coveted power and control long before Lila had even discovered her own. His eyes burned with an ambition so cold, so absolute, that even the snow seemed to shiver in his presence. Lila froze for the briefest moment, heart hammering, breath ragged, silver flame pulsing faintly beneath her skin, a warning and a whisper all at once. Run. Fight. Choose. Every instinct screamed at her, and yet she found herself unable to move, caught in the gravity of the moment, caught in the tension between danger and desire, caught between fear and a strange, inexplicable pull toward Derek. "Lila!" Derek barked, voice slicing through the storm of wind and snarls. His hand gripped hers with unyielding strength, pulling her back as a rogue wolf lunged, fangs glinting in the moonlight. She felt the impact of his presence more than his strength, more than the shield he offered. It was certainty, a living promise that for the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight for her even against impossible odds. The wolves attacked with a ferocity that made the ground quake, but Derek moved like a shadow unleashed, body flowing from strike to strike with lethal precision. Teeth snapped, claws shredded through snow and bark, yet he remained unyielding, a wall of raw power between the threat and Lila. She watched, heart in her throat, as he fought, not just with strength but with strategy, with awareness, with the dangerous elegance of a predator who knew every possible outcome and still pressed forward. And then Rhett stepped forward, a cold, calculating grin curling across his lips. "So, the Moonfire Bearer stands with the Shadowfang Alpha," he said, voice like ice breaking over stone. "How convenient." Derek's eyes narrowed, tension coiling like a spring ready to strike. "Rhett, step back, or this ends with your pack scattered across these woods." Rhett laughed, low and cruel. "Do you think a girl with Silverfire can sway destiny? that she can unite packs without breaking under the weight. His eyes flicked to Lila, sharp and assessing, hunger and ambition written in every line of his face. Or perhaps she's not the one at all, and you'll fail trying to protect her. Lila's stomach twisted, a swirl of fear, anger, and a strange rising thrill. His words were knives, yet they ignited something deeper, a fire she had tried to suppress, a part of her that refused to be caged any longer. The silver flame pulsed stronger beneath her skin, responding to the danger, responding to the challenge, responding to the undeniable truth that she was not powerless here, not anymore. Derek moved to intercept another wave of wolves, and in a split second of desperation and instinct, Lila acted. She stepped forward, feet sinking into snow, heart hammering, breath ragged, and released a surge of silver fire, not fully controlled, not polished, but raw, electric, and brilliant. Wolves yelped, eyes wide, and skidded back as the energy flared, a brilliant arc of light cutting through the darkness. Rhett's eyes widened in surprise, and for a heartbeat she felt something almost intoxicating: control. The power that had always seemed like a curse was no longer a whisper. It roared through her, alive and untamed, and for the first time she understood why they had feared her all those years. But the thrill was short-lived. The pack, once allies, once friends, now stared at her with suspicion and fear. Whispers sliced through the chaos. She's dangerous. She will destroy us. He cannot be trusted. Their eyes, wide and accusatory even as wolves continued to attack, pierced her heart more than any Fong ever could. "You don't understand," she shouted, voice trembling with anger and frustration, silver light dancing across her fingertips. "I'm not your enemy." But the murmurs only grew louder, fear feeding fear, suspicion feeding suspicion. Derek's jaw tightened and he moved closer, shielding her from the judgmental eyes, yet the tension between them was palpable. His grip was steady, but she could feel the weight of the pack's accusation, the danger of betrayal even as she fought to protect them. And then, in a moment that broke her heart, she realized what she had to do. The storm was relentless, the wolves pressing in, Rhett's gaze cutting into her very soul. She could not stay, not if she wanted to survive, not if she wanted to master the power that had been sleeping inside her for years. Not if she wanted to be more than what they feared her to be. She broke free, tearing herself from Derek's steadying hands, the snow beneath her boots flying with every desperate step. Her heart ached, not from the cold, not from the exertion, but from leaving him, from leaving the first person in years who had not recoiled, who had not condemned her, who had truly seen her. "Lila." Derek's voice echoed behind her, sharp and pained. But she could not turn back. Not yet. Survival, power, destiny. They demanded she run, demanded she embrace the fire that had been whispered about for generations. She vanished into the storm, silver flames flickering faintly behind her, illuminating the path through snow, ice, and shadowed trees. The howl of wolves echoed in the distance, but it was not the sound of fear that gripped her now. It was anticipation. Every fiber of her being screamed to control, to learn, to master, to rise. The storm, the prophecy, the threat of rival alphas and rogue packs. It all became fuel. Fuel for power. Fuel for transformation. Fuel for destiny. And as she ran, heart pounding, lungs burning, wolf stirring beneath her skin, one thought anchored her, fierce and unyielding. She would not be broken. She would not be caged. And when the time came, the world would see what the Moonfire Bear was truly capable of. Rhett Blackthorn, the rogue wolves, the fearful pack. It would all have to wait. For now, she had fire to master and a storm inside her that would not be silenced. Every step carried her further from Derek, yet every heartbeat tethered her to him. The kiss in the storm, the warmth of his hands, the certainty in his eyes. It lingered, burning, impossible to forget. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest part of all. Even in flight, even in isolation, even in the fierce embrace of her growing power, she could feel him. Derek Blackwood. Protector, alpha, anchor. And perhaps, the first tether to a life she had never dared to hope for. The snow swirled, whipping across her face, freezing tears against her cheeks. Yet she ran, embracing the storm, embracing her power, embracing the terrifying, exhilarating truth. She was no longer merely surviving. She was awakening. And the world, whether ready or not, would have to reckon with the force she was becoming. If your heart is racing with the battle, if you feel the pulse of silver fire and destiny, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. Lila's journey is only just beginning, and the first clash is just the spark of a storm that will consume everything. The storm raged outside, relentless, a blur of wind, ice and snow that pounded against the jagged rocks like the heartbeat of the world itself. Inside the cave, however, the fire crackled with a golden warmth, casting flickering shadows along the walls and painting their faces in hues of amber and gold. Lila sat close enough to feel the heat on her skin, but far enough to keep the distance that had become her shield over years of pain. Her silver flame pulsed faintly beneath her skin, a whisper of energy that seemed to sync with the rhythm of the fire, restless, untamed, alive. Derek sat opposite her, legs drawn up, elbows resting on his knees, gaze fixed on the flames. But every so often he would look at her, eyes dark, unreadable, yet intensely focused, as if he were measuring not just her presence, but the weight of everything she carried with her. The storm outside could not compare to the tension between them, a quiet, crackling energy that made every breath and every heartbeat feel magnified. "You know," Derek began, voice low and steady, careful, almost hesitant, "I've seen betrayal before. My first pack destroyed itself from within. Friends I trusted, ones I called family, turned on each other. Turned on me. I lost everything." Lila's chest tightened. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of tragedy, the raw, intimate honesty of a man who had known loss in a way that mirrored her own. She could see it in his posture, in the slight curve of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, the flicker of something broken behind his eyes. She started, voice shaking, then faltered. The memories she had tried to bury clawed at her from beneath the surface. The forced marriage, the nights spent hiding from Lord Victor Hale's anger, the fear of being controlled, the quiet, suffocating despair of knowing she had been considered a possession rather than a person. "I understand. I've been there. Not exactly like you, but close enough." Derek's gaze lifted, slow, deliberate, and the firelight reflected off his eyes in a way that made her pulse hitch. "Tell me," he said quietly, a command not of authority but of invitation. "I want to understand. If you're willing." The cave seemed to shrink around them, the storm outside fading to nothing more than a distant roar. She drew in a breath, letting it fill her lungs before releasing it slowly, as though the words themselves were dangerous, like sparks she feared could ignite a flame she could not contain. "My marriage," she began, voice trembling. "It wasn't real. I was forced into it. Lord Victor, he wasn't kind. He wanted control. Always control. I didn't even have a choice." She pressed her hands together, knuckles white, and for a moment the silver flame pulsed stronger, responding to the surge of emotion. "I learned to survive. That was all I could do. Hide my power. Hide myself. Because if they knew who I really was, they'd want to destroy me." Derek's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, yet the tension in the room eased slightly. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and the firelight traced the lines of his face, making him look both formidable and achingly human. "You survived," he said simply. "You're here. You're alive. That's more than many could say. And it's not just survival, you're stronger than you think." Lila swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. The warmth in his voice, the honesty in his eyes, it was unfamiliar and frightening. She had spent so long building walls, keeping people at a distance, convincing herself that trust was a weakness, and yet, here he was. Derek Blackwood, Alpha King, danger incarnate, and yet somehow inexplicably safe. He had saved her life once, yes, but more than that, he was showing her something she had not felt in years. A quiet, unshakable acceptance. The silence stretched between them, the kind that hums with unspoken understanding. Every glance, every shift of weight, every flicker of flame in the fire seemed charged with 1,000 possibilities, each more terrifying and exhilarating than the last. "You trust easily?" she asked, almost under her breath, though the fire seemed to carry the words far louder than intended. Derek chuckled softly, low and rich, a sound that rumbled through her chest. "Not easily," he admitted. "But I see things, people. And I see you, Lila. All of you. The fire. Pain. The fear. The strength. And I see what you're capable of." Her breath caught, a tremor running through her body. The cave felt suddenly smaller, hotter, closer. The pulse of her silver flame quickened, echoing the beat of her heart, and for a moment the boundaries between them, The barriers she had built, the distance she had enforced, seemed to dissolve like snow in sunlight. Derek shifted slightly, and the faintest brush of his fingers against hers sent a jolt through her nerves, sharp and electric. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, alert, curious, tense, and yet strangely serene. This touch, so light, so deliberate, was dangerous. It was intimate. It was a connection. Something she had been taught to avoid, to fear, to distrust, and yet impossible to resist. She began, voice catching again, I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. He leaned closer, not imposing but present, undeniable. Then don't, he whispered low, a soft rumble that pressed against her ears, against her chest, against the walls she had spent her entire life building. Not yet. But don't close yourself off completely. That's the danger. You'll never know how strong you are, how much power you can wield, if you never let anyone in. Her heart thudded painfully, eyes flicking to his lips, and for a heartbeat, for a fraction of a moment, she imagined pressing her own against his. The thought made her pulse spike, her wolf stir, her breath hitch. Every instinct screamed warning, yet every other instinct, the one that longed for connection, for understanding, for safety and belonging, screamed louder. You're dangerous, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Your presence, it's overwhelming. He smiled, faint, almost imperceptibly, yet it held a gravity that made her chest ache. And you are fire. Untamed. Unbroken. Dangerous. That's why you're the Moonfire Bearer. That's why you'll survive. I see you. Her breath hitched again, eyes wide, mind spinning, pulse raging. The cave seemed to shrink around them, the fire crackling louder, the shadows stretching and curling like sentient things. The tension was unbearable, magnetic, a charge that could spark at any moment, ignite any second. She wanted to run her fingers through his hair. She wanted to press closer, to taste the promise that lingered in the warmth of his skin, to surrender, just for a moment, to the intimacy that hovered dangerously between them. And yet fear held her back. Fear of vulnerability, fear of betrayal, fear of losing herself in a world that had never been kind. He leaned slightly closer, eyes locking on hers, voice a whisper that brushed against her soul. I see you, all of you. Not just the fire. Not just the fear. Not just the pain. All of it. And I accept it. All of it. Her knees weakened, her pulse thundered, and the world narrowed to the crackling fire, the electric space between them, and the undeniable truth that for the first time in her life, someone truly understood her. And yet, even as the warmth of connection threatened to melt the walls she had built for decades, the shadows of danger lingered at the edges of the cave. The rogue wolves, the rival alpha, the whispers of prophecy, they were not gone. The storm outside, both literal and metaphorical, pressed against her, reminding her that safety, trust, and love were luxuries she had rarely known and could easily lose. Her wolf growled softly within, cautious, aware, protective. The human part of her trembled with desire, with longing, with need. Every instinct screamed, trust him. Every instinct also screamed, beware. Every beat of her heart was a collision of fire and ice, desire and fear, power and vulnerability. And yet, in the flickering warmth of that cave, in the quiet intimacy of the firelight, she allowed herself to lean just a fraction closer. She allowed herself to hear his heartbeat, to feel the steady pull of his presence, to acknowledge the connection that neither time, distance, nor danger could sever entirely. Because in that moment Lila Montgomery understood something dangerous, exhilarating, and terrifying. Trust was not weakness. Connection was not defeat. And desire could be a weapon as powerful as any flame, as vital as any prophecy, as unpredictable as the storm that raged beyond the cave's entrance. If your heart raced with every flicker of the fire, every shared glance, every whispered confession, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. Lila's journey is only beginning, and the storm of heart, fire, and destiny will consume you, page by page, heartbeat by heartbeat. The fire in the cave had dimmed to embers, and the snowstorm outside had softened, almost deceptively calm, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Lila thought briefly that maybe, just maybe, they had survived the night. Derek's presence beside her, steady and protective, still filled the space like a promise, and for a heartbeat she allowed herself to believe in safety, in trust, in the fragile illusion of peace. But peace, she learned long ago, was never permanent. Not for her. Not for anyone who bore Silverfire. The council chamber loomed in her mind, sharp and suffocating, though she had not yet set foot inside it. She had felt it, a presence heavy and deliberate, a shadow moving unseen. Lord Victor Hale. His spies had not rested, not even after months of her escape. And now they had found their way here. Or perhaps the betrayal had been closer than she ever imagined. She sensed it before she saw it. The shift in Derek's posture, the tightening of his jaw, the subtle glance exchanged with the council members who had always been his most trusted advisors. Their eyes, dark with suspicion, narrowed in ways that made her stomach twist. Derek's alpha presence usually radiated authority, control, unshakable calm, but now she saw the first cracks. Hesitation. Confusion. Torn loyalty. Lila Montgomery. A voice called out, measured, accusing, slicing through the stillness like a blade. She turned to see the council elder, silver hair catching the dim light, eyes cold, judgmental. You stand among us, yet your power is dangerous. Forbidden. You bear the mark of Silverfire, and that mark will not only bring destruction upon yourself but upon all the packs you touch. Her chest tightened. The words were knives, carved from fear and certainty. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, but Derek's hand on her shoulder froze her. His touch was firm, grounding, yet it carried a tension she had never felt from him before. A conflict, a battle of instincts he could not ignore. The whispers began then, like the hiss of wind over a cliff. She will destroy us. She cannot be trusted. She is not one of us. The council's voice grew louder, a chorus of condemnation. And in the center of it all she saw it. Lord Hale's spies, hidden in the shadows, eyes glinting with triumph. They had revealed her secret, weaponized her existence. And now, every fear she had ever buried clawed its way to the surface. Derek stepped forward, alpha presence radiating yet faltering. She is not a threat, he said, voice strong but threaded with conflict. You do not understand. Her power, her Silverfire, it is part of her. It is part of all of us if we only guide it right. The council elder's gaze hardened. You defend her at your own peril, Derek. He is a danger. And you are her mate. Are you prepared to risk everything for one woman's fire? Lila's heart broke in that moment. Not for herself, not yet, but for Derek. The weight of choice, of loyalty, of impossible demands pressed down on him visibly, a storm mirrored in his eyes. And she, the one who had fled, who had survived, who had fought to embrace her own power, could do nothing but watch. Then it happened. Her emotions, raw and unfiltered, surged through her like lightning. Betrayal. Anger. Fear. The sense that the world would never allow her to be whole, to exist without judgment, without persecution. She had hidden for years, tamed her power in whispers and shadows, and now, forced into a corner, the Silverfire responded. The flames were not the gentle flicker she had summoned in the cave. They erupted. Brilliant, blinding, white-hot with silver and hints of blue, swirling around her like a storm incarnate. Snow melted to steam. Rocks cracked under the sudden heat. Shadows fled before the raw intensity, as if nature itself had recognized the force she had long contained and recoiled in awe. Derek's eyes widened, caught between fear and awe. He moved to step forward to reach her, but she could feel his hesitation. Uncertainty, the fear that she might finally become the destruction they all whispered about. And yet, even as the flames roared, her wolf stirred, screaming with exhilaration, with liberation, with the thrill of a power that was finally hers, raw, untamed, and undeniable. The council fell back, voices rising in panic. Control it. She cannot, she will destroy us. But Lila could not hear them. He could not see them. All that existed was the fire, the storm of energy, the pulse of power in her veins, and the burning, searing truth. She was not a victim. She was not a pawn. She was no longer the girl who had fled a forced marriage, hiding in fear, shackled by doubt. He was a force. She was fire incarnate. And in that instant she understood the cruel clarity of destiny. The world would try to condemn her. The world would try to control her. And she would have to rise beyond it all, alone or with Derek, if he dared to trust the fire that had always been hers. The flames danced around her, illuminating her face, and she saw Derek. His expression had softened, awe mingled with fear, his alpha instincts screaming caution, yet beneath it all something else. Understanding. Recognition. Connection. He had seen glimpses of her power before in the cave in the storm, but this was the full, unbridled force, the proof of what she had always been capable of and yet, terrifyingly, what the world feared her to be. Derek began, stepping closer despite the danger, voice strained. Lila, you don't have to be alone in this. We can. But she couldn't stop it. The flames, a living, breathing extension of her soul, surged forward with a roar and she fled. Not from Derek, but from the judgment, from the fear, from the world that had never accepted her. Every step echoed through the forest, silver light trailing like a comet, lighting the snow and trees with brilliance that left even the rogue wolves cowering in awe. She did not know where she was going. He did not care. Control was a distant dream. Survival was secondary. All that mattered was that she was free for the first time in years, free in her power, free in her rage, free in her heartbreak. The council's shouts faded behind her, Derek's voice calling, warning, pleading, yet she could not stop. Not yet. Not when the fire inside her demanded release, demanded acknowledgement, demanded transformation. And in that moment, in the cold, snow-swept forest, beneath the fractured light of moon and storm, she glimpsed the edge of what she could become. Silverfire. Moonfire. Power unbound. And the terrifying, exhilarating truth. Mastery would come, but only through struggle. Only through survival. Only through accepting the force she had been born to wield, and the destiny that the world would never willingly allow her to claim. She vanished into the night, leaving behind fear, judgment, betrayal, and even Derek's outstretched hand. The storm within her mirrored the storm outside. And the world had no choice but to wait, trembling, for the fire that had been awakened could not be contained any longer. If your heart raced with betrayal, fury, and the first taste of unstoppable power, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. Lila's full awakening is only the beginning, and the storm of destiny, love, and Silverfire has only just begun to consume her world. The snow had turned to ice beneath her boots, cracking with every step, yet Lila barely felt it. Every nerve in her body hummed with raw energy, a blazing pulse that mirrored the thunder in her chest. She could hear the distant howls of the rogue wolves, but they were no longer threats. Not now. Not when she had felt the fire rise within her. Not when she had tasted what it meant to wield Silverfire untamed. The forest opened up suddenly, revealing the jagged peaks of the mountains beyond. They loomed like silent witnesses, frozen sentinels to a world that had long feared her. And there, at the base of the cliffs, Derek's pack was under siege. Rhett Blackthorn and his rogue forces surrounding the outer perimeter, eyes glowing with hunger and malice. Derek stood at the center, alpha stance unwavering, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed the weight of impossible choice. "Stay back," he shouted, voice cutting like a knife through the frigid wind. She's coming." Lila paused at the tree line, breath steaming, body alive with power. For a heartbeat she allowed herself to feel the storm fully. The betrayal, the fear, the anger, the grief, the longing for connection, the fire of destiny that had roared to life inside her. Then, with a roar that was both human and wolf, she let it surge forward, letting every ounce of hesitation fall away. Her form shimmered with silver light first, a glow so bright it seemed to set the snow aflame. Muscles reshaped, bones shifted, fur sprouted in shimmering streaks of silver and cobalt, eyes igniting with moonlight, and a howl tore from her throat, a sound so primal, so commanding, that even the mountains seemed to shiver in response. This was not the frightened girl fleeing a forced marriage. This was Silverfire incarnate, unleashed, untamed, magnificent. The rogue wolves froze, ears back, eyes wide, sensing the shift in the air, the dominance, the power, the ancient lineage that demanded respect. Rhett stepped forward, trying to rally them, voice barking orders, but the words fell flat against the tidal wave of energy that Lila had become. Her senses sharpened beyond human comprehension. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every falter in their movements registered with crystalline clarity. She could smell the fear of the enemy Alpha, feel the tension in his shoulders, taste the desperation of the rogue pack as their coordinated assault faltered under her presence. Mountains trembled. Snow erupted in clouds around her as she leapt forward, her claws leaving silver streaks in the ice. Rhett barely had time to react before she was upon him, light bursting from her form like the first sun after a long frozen night. He stumbled, eyes wide with disbelief, and for the first time she felt no hesitation. Not mercy, not fear, only the full, intoxicating force of Silverfire. Enough. Derek's voice roared from behind her, commanding yet filled with awe. She is not your enemy. And it was true. The enemy faltered under the brilliance of her light, and in that moment, the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. The ancient ruins scattered throughout the mountains, weathered by centuries of storm and shadow, began to awaken. Stones shifted, runes glowed, and the very ground beneath their feet responded to her power, echoing the truth she had always carried within her. She was not a pawn. She was not a weapon to be controlled. She was destiny incarnate, a force the world could no longer ignore. Rhett screamed, rage and terror mingling as the light consumed the battlefield, and then with a final surge the rogue Alpha fled, retreating into the shadows that had once given him power. The wolves scattered, instinctively bowing before the undeniable command of Silverfire. Lila landed atop a ridge, chest heaving, fur shimmering with residual light, eyes blazing like twin moons over a snow-streaked horizon. She was victorious, triumphant, empowered. And yet beneath it all the human part of her, the part that had loved, feared, lost and hoped, beat steadily against the roar of her wolf, reminding her that power alone could not heal all wounds. Derek approached slowly, cautious yet unyielding, eyes wide with awe. Every step he took was deliberate, careful, honoring the force she had just unleashed while simultaneously seeking the woman he had come to care for deeply. He reached her, and for the first time in days the distance between them was gone. The warmth of his presence, steady and sure, wrapped around her like a shield, but unlike before, it did not feel confining. "Ho. You did it," he breathed, voice low, almost reverent. "You, Lila. You are beyond what I imagined. Beyond what anyone imagined." She lowered her head, silver light dimming to a faint shimmer, fur softening back toward human form. Her eyes, however, retained the brilliance of the battle, the fire that had consumed everything around her, and the raw power of someone who had claimed herself entirely. I had no choice," she whispered, chest heaving. "They were going to destroy you. They were going to destroy everything you care about. I couldn't." Derek placed a hand on her cheek, tilting her face gently so that his eyes held hers. "You didn't just save me. You saved everyone. And you saved yourself. That was no accident, Lila. That was you claiming who you are. And it's beautiful. Terrifying. Necessary." The tension between them shifted, subtly, palpably. Not just desire but recognition. Respect. A bond forged not only through danger and passion but through the shared understanding of sacrifice, power and destiny. Her wolf growled softly, not in aggression but in agreement, an acknowledgement that the human and wolf within her had reconciled, if only partially, with the truth of who she had become. The ruins around them pulsed faintly with light, as though acknowledging her mastery. Ancient runes shimmered, stones rearranged themselves subtly, and the wind carried whispers of old spirits, murmurs of prophecy fulfilled and yet incomplete. She was not the girl who had fled a forced marriage. She was not the pawn of rival alphas or the fear of councils. She was a force, a living embodiment of prophecy, of fire and frost, of destruction and creation intertwined. Derek took a step closer again, voice low and intimate. "You are not just Silverfire. You are Lila Montgomery. And I see all of you. Every part. Every flame. Every shadow. And he faltered, letting the words hang like sparks in the air. "I will stand with you. Whatever comes next." Her chest tightened with emotion, wolf and human alike, as she realized the gravity of what had just passed. She had mastered her power, not fully, not yet, but enough to know that control was possible, that she could claim herself entirely, that the fire could serve her instead of consuming her. And in that realization there was freedom. The rogue wolves had fled. Rhett Blackthorn was gone, licking his wounds in distant shadow. The council would have to reckon with her anew, and Derek's pack would need time to accept her fully, but for the first time none of that mattered. She had taken the stand. She had declared herself unbreakable. And the world for once would have to acknowledge it. She breathed deeply, eyes sweeping the snow-streaked battlefield, feeling the pulse of Silverfire settle into a steady rhythm. Mountains quaked faintly beneath her paws, ice glimmered like starlight, and the ruins hummed with ancient approval. And then, turning her gaze to Derek, she allowed herself to smile. A small, fierce, liberated smile that carried every ounce of defiance, grief and hope she had ever felt. He returned it, a quiet acknowledgement, fierce yet tender, the silent promise of alliance, love and shared destiny. She was no longer a girl fleeing a forced marriage. She was no longer a hunted, betrayed or broken soul. She was Silverfire, Moonfire, Lila Montgomery, and she had claimed it all. The wind howled around them, carrying snow and silver light, echoing the roar of the unleashed power, a reminder that the world had changed. And somewhere deep within her, the wolf stirred with satisfaction, fierce and unrelenting, ready for whatever came next. If your heart burned with Lila's power, if you felt the pulse of Silverfire and destiny, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. Her journey is far from over, and the storm of love, power and prophecy is only just beginning. Witness the fire unfold. Every spark, every heartbeat, every unstoppable moment. The battlefield had fallen silent. Snow drifted lazily, settling over broken branches, over the scorched earth where light had danced and fire had roared. Lila stood alone atop the ridge, chest heaving, fur still glinting with the faint shimmer of Silverfire, eyes like twin moons reflecting everything she had lost and everything she had claimed. Derek watched her from below, voice caught somewhere between awe and fear, yet he did not step forward. Not yet. Around her, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind paused in its restless wandering, leaving only the echoes of what had been, echoes of betrayal, echoes of fire, echoes of a girl who had refused to remain small, refused to be silenced, refused to be tamed. And yet, beneath the brilliance of her power, beneath the triumph and liberation, lingered a question as old as the mountains themselves. Would they, the world that had hunted her, the pack that had doubted her, the men who had sought to control her, would they choose her? Or would they fear her? The thought twisted through her heart with the familiar ache of isolation. She had lived too long knowing that power often breeds fear, that strength often brings solitude. Even Derek, her mate, her anchor, her connection to something human and tender, had hesitated. He had seen the light, the silver blaze of her awakening, and yet even in awe, even in desire there had been hesitation, an instinctual pause that mirrored every doubt she had ever carried. She turned her gaze to the horizon, snowflakes settling on fur and hair alike, shimmering as if they too were witnesses to her transformation. Her mind swirled with the memories of all that had brought her here, the chains of a forced marriage, the bruises hidden beneath silk and lace, the nights of silence broken only by the whisper of her wolf, the endless cold of rejection, of exile, of fear. And through it all she had learned one immutable truth. To survive, to thrive, to claim herself fully, she had to be willing to face the judgment, to face the fear, to be the fire no one else dared to contain. Yet even in that certainty, a question burned hotter than any flame. One that would not leave her, even as the adrenaline of battle ebbed, even as the echoes of Silverfire settled into her bones. Would they stand with her? Would Derek, the one man who had seen her, truly see her, choose her fully? Or would the world's fear of what she was, of what she could become, push them away? Would she always be an anomaly? A threat? A girl cursed with too much fire? The wind picked up again, swirling around her like a living thing, brushing icy fingers over her face. She raised her hands, feeling the subtle pulse of Silverfire lingering, the residue of her power still alive, still hungry, still demanding recognition. And in that moment she realized the truth of her existence. Power alone did not guarantee acceptance, love, or trust. Power demanded choice. And she could not choose for the world. She could only choose herself. The forest seemed to lean in closer, the shadows flickering with anticipation, as if the very earth itself were asking the same question she carried. Will you choose her, or fear her? Would you have chosen Lila, the girl who had survived betrayal, fire, and exile? The one whose power had reshaped the battlefield, whose courage had defied the impossible? Or would you have stepped back, trembling, unable to bear the weight of destiny manifest in silver and moonlight? Hero, or girl cursed with too much fire? She inhaled deeply, lungs filling with the cold, sharp air, chest rising and falling like the cadence of a drum announcing an inevitable storm. Derek remained below, eyes wide, heart visible in the subtle tension of his posture, torn between awe, fear, desire, and loyalty. And she, standing above him, radiating both vulnerability and command, realized that this moment, this precise, fleeting instant, was as much about choice as it was about power. Choice. She had chosen herself. The world, Derek, even her enemies would have to reckon with the reality of Lila Montgomery, the Silverfire. And now, in the quiet aftermath of battle and awakening, it was the audience, the world beyond the forest, beyond the story, beyond the snow and storm, that faced the question. Would you too choose her? Would you dare to stand with her, to witness her fire without fear, to embrace the force of a girl who had claimed herself in a world that had sought to crush her? The snow swirled around her in delicate, sparkling currents, light from the moon and the lingering shimmer of Silverfire mingling, reflecting off her hair, her fur, her eyes, creating a vision so vivid, so alive, that it felt as though the night itself had paused to honor her courage. She lifted her chin, the wind carrying her hair back like a banner of defiance, and in the subtle curve of her lips was the faintest hint of triumph, a promise not to be broken, not to be silenced, not to be tamed. And then, soft but firm, the narrator's voice carries directly to the listener. If Lila's story lit something inside you, if her fire, her courage, her defiance stirred your heart, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. We tell tales that burn. Tales of love that defies danger, of power that challenges destiny, of women who refuse to be less than they are meant to be. Lila is only the beginning, and the world is watching to see if you will stand with her, or step back in fear. A final gust of wind swept across the ridge, scattering snow and lingering light like embers into the dark forest. Derek's gaze never left her. Neither did the world's. And somewhere, deep in the silence, Lila understood that the fire she had claimed would never be hers alone. It would demand witness, loyalty, and courage from all who dared to stand beside her. Would you choose her side? Or would you fear the girl who had mastered fire and destiny in the span of a heartbeat? The answer, like the snow, hung suspended in the air, sparkling with possibility, danger, and the promise of more, because Lila Montgomery's story was far from over. The snow had softened into a quiet hush, a fragile silence that stretched across the evernight forest like a held breath. Lila and Derek walked side by side, steps careful, deliberate, leaving silver footprints behind them that shimmered faintly in the dim moonlight. The forest seemed to exhale around them, frost settling on branches, coating the world in white tranquility after the chaos, after the fire, after the battle that had reshaped more than just the land. It had reshaped the very essence of destiny itself. Her fur still glimmered with the faint residual shimmer of Silverfire, her wolf instincts alert, but tempered, like a storm that had passed yet left the air electric. Derek matched her pace, silent, steady, his eyes scanning the forest edges, mind calculating and protective, yet his heart tethered to the rhythm of hers. Every so often he would glance at her, almost unconsciously, as if fearing that even a single moment of inattention might allow the world to intrude upon the fragile bubble they had carved from the night. They walked not as conquerors or victors but as survivors. Wounded, yes, but undefeated. And yet, an uneasy tension lingered between them, as palpable as the frost on the pines. The victory had been absolute, breathtaking, and terrifying, but it had also awakened something larger, something older, something that had been waiting, biding its time in the shadows beyond comprehension. The trees swayed lightly in the wind, whispering secrets they had carried for centuries, carrying the echoes of ancestors, of spirits who had once roamed this forest in wolf and human form alike. Lila's ears twitched at every sound, the faint rustle of branches, the distant howl, the subtle shift of snow, and her heart skipped in recognition. She knew instinctively that this peace was temporary, that the forces she had awakened, the prophecy she had touched, the fire she had claimed, they were not done with her. Derek finally broke the silence, voice low, yet threaded with wonder and wariness. "We've survived this night, but the storm isn't over. I can feel it, Lila. There are forces beyond this forest, beyond the rogue alphas, beyond even what we've faced, waiting." Lila's jaw tightened, eyes scanning the horizon. The frost sparkled like diamonds in the pale moonlight, but beneath the beauty was a subtle vibration she could feel in her chest, a resonance of power echoing far beyond the boundaries of her Silverfire, as if the earth itself whispered secrets she could not yet comprehend. She paused at the edge of a ridge, letting the cold bite her cheeks, letting the wind whip her hair across her face. She sensed it first. A presence, faint, deliberate, almost imperceptible. shadows twisting in the darkness beyond the tree line, too purposeful to be natural. The hairs along her neck lifted, her wolf instincts coiling like a spring ready to strike. A voice, low, smooth and dangerous, drifted on the wind. Not human, not fully wolf, but something older, something primordial. She is not the only one, the whisper hissed, curling through the night like smoke, stirring the frost and stirring the forest itself. The true alpha hasn't risen, yet. Lila stiffened, pulse quickening. Derek's hand tightened around hers, instinctively protective, yet even his strong presence could not erase the weight of the words. Her mind raced. Other Silverfire? Another alpha? Forces older than even her own power, waiting, watching, scheming in the shadows? Every lesson of betrayal, every moment of fear, every night spent running came rushing back. And yet, beneath it all, a spark of exhilaration ignited. Because she had survived. She had faced fire, frost, and fear. She had claimed herself. And now the world and all its hidden powers was being forced to recognize her. Derek leaned slightly closer, voice tense, almost a whisper, reverent. Whatever comes, we face it together. But she, whatever she is, whoever she was, she's not finished. And neither are we. Lila nodded, wolf and human in perfect alignment. The wind carried her hair like silver banners, brushing against her face, whispering ancient secrets, speaking of danger, destiny, and power she had not yet fully grasped. Every nerve screamed anticipation. Every heartbeat thrummed with the knowledge that the world was larger, older, and far more dangerous than she had imagined. And yet she did not flinch. Because fear had no claim on her anymore. Fear was the thing she had left behind in the snow-drenched forest, on the ridge where she had first embraced her fire. What remained was power, determination, and the unshakable certainty that no shadow, no enemy, no force, ancient or modern, could define her. Only she could define herself. The forest darkened as the night deepened. Branches creaked, shadows lengthened, and the faint glimmer of her Silverfire light reflected in Derek's eyes like twin flames. Every step they took echoed on frozen ground, a soft percussion that reverberated through the trees, as if the forest itself recognized the rising storm of destiny. The whisper returned, softer this time, almost a murmur at the edge of perception. The alpha has yet to rise, and the reckoning will come. Lila's eyes narrowed, every muscle coiled, wolf instincts alert. This was no idle threat. This was a promise. A call. A herald of trials that had not yet come to pass. And in that acknowledgement she felt the weight of the prophecy tighten around her heart. But instead of fear it brought clarity. She had survived betrayal, mastered fire, claimed her power and faced destiny itself. Whatever came next, she would rise to meet it. Derek stepped closer, brushing snow from her shoulders, eyes locking with hers. "You're ready," he said, voice low, steady, unflinching. "And together we'll face whatever shadows are out there." She let out a slow breath, chest rising and falling in rhythm with the cold night. Her wolf growled softly, a deep, rumbling acknowledgement that the hunt was far from over, but the prey, if prey it even was, would know her power. And yet, even as the fire of Silverfire pulsed faintly along her veins, she understood the truth. The journey ahead was not hers alone. Allies would be tested, enemies would rise, and the forces of prophecy would not rest. A final gust of wind swept through the forest, scattering frost and silver light, carrying the whispered promise of the unseen alpha, the trials yet to come, and the reckoning that would reshape all packs. Lila and Derek stopped, side by side, their silhouettes framed against the rising moon, shadows stretching into the snow like heralds of what was to come. And as the forest settled into a fragile, tense quiet, the narrator's voice draws the audience close, intimate and haunting. Her story is far from over. The shadows are stirring. The fire has awakened. And the true alpha has yet to rise. Will you be there to witness it? Will you stand with her? Or step back in fear? Lila Montgomery has claimed her power, but the world has yet to claim her story. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, because this is only the beginning. The tale that burns is not done, and the echoes of Silverfire will reach you if you dare to listen. The forest held its silence a heartbeat longer. Then the wind whispered again, carrying frost and foreboding, and the story of Lila Montgomery, Silverfire, survivor, prophet and rising alpha, drifted into the night, leaving a lingering pulse in the listener's chest. Anticipation, wonder, fear, and the undeniable pull of destiny still waiting to be claimed.